There are stories the internet turns into spectacle. And then there are stories that begin long before the camera ever arrives. Timmy Whittaker's life did not start with YouTube views. It did not start with headlines about America's most inbred family. It did not start with viral clips or donation links or comment sections full of theories. It started in 1979, in a small, rural community called Odd, West Virginia. To understand Timmy's story, we have to separate what is documented from what is assumed. Because when a family becomes a public curiosity, speculation multiplies faster than facts. And nowhere is that more true than when people ask the question that has followed Timmy for decades. Who is his father? Before we approach that question, we begin with what is publicly known. Timmy Whittaker was born in 1979 to Lauren Whittaker, a member of a family that had already lived for generations in extreme poverty and isolation in rural Appalachia. Lauren was described, in public interviews and footage over the years, as having significant developmental disabilities. She was largely nonverbal, communicating through limited sounds and gestures. Family members often indicated that she understood more than she could express, but she relied heavily on siblings for daily care. The Whittaker household itself was small and crowded. Multiple adult siblings lived together. Utilities were inconsistent over the years. Running water was not always available. Income was limited. The family survived through disability benefits, odd jobs, coal heat, and community assistance. When Timmy was born, no public record ever identified his father. There was no documented paternity acknowledgement, no public court case establishing support, no confirmed criminal case identifying a perpetrator, no official statement naming a person. And that absence of information became the seed of decades of speculation. What we can say with certainty is this: Timmy grew up in the Whittaker household. He was raised not by a nuclear family structure, but by a collective one. His aunt Betty Whittaker became a primary caregiver figure. His uncles Larry and Kenneth were present in his life. Ray Whittaker, who also had communication difficulties, shared space and daily routines with him. Timmy did not grow up alone. He grew up surrounded by family. From early childhood, Timmy displayed developmental challenges similar to some of his relatives. His speech was limited. His motor coordination was uneven. He required supervision. He did not communicate in full sentences. Observers over the years have speculated about autism or other cognitive conditions, but no publicly released medical records confirm a specific diagnosis. Here is where caution matters. The internet has repeatedly claimed that Timmy's condition proves something about his father, that he must have been a relative, that incest must have occurred again, that his disabilities confirm a genetic link. But there is no verified documentation publicly confirming that. Disability does not automatically equal incest. Cognitive impairment does not establish paternity. Physical similarity does not equal proof. In isolated rural communities with limited healthcare access, developmental conditions can arise from numerous factors: genetic predispositions, prenatal care limitations, environmental exposure, untreated medical complications, malnutrition, or combinations of all of the above. Speculation is not evidence. So what do we actually know about the father question? We know the family has never publicly identified him. We know no court record has publicly surfaced naming him. We know no confirmed criminal conviction related to Timmy's conception has been publicly documented. We know Lauren was vulnerable. We know rural investigations in the late 1970s were often limited in resources and oversight. Beyond that, the record goes quiet, and in that silence, people filled in their own answers. As Timmy grew older, something happened that complicates the simplistic narrative often told about him. He attended school. Not casually, not briefly. He completed high school. Based on his 1979 birth year, he would have graduated around 1997 or 1998. Public accounts from former classmates have indicated that he was enrolled in special education classes. Some former students have stated that he used a different last name during school, reportedly to avoid stigma associated with the Whittaker name. That detail, if accurate, says something profound. It suggests awareness. It suggests social pressure. It suggests that even as a teenager, Timmy understood that his family carried a reputation. And despite the barriers, poverty, disability, isolation, stigma, he graduated. That is a documented milestone. After high school, Timmy returned home. There were no structured adult support programs publicly visible at the time, no independent living pathway, no employment pipeline. Like many adults with significant disabilities in rural communities, he remained with family. For years, his life remained largely invisible to the outside world. Until 2004, that was the year photographer Mark Leiter first encountered the Whittaker family while working on a photography project documenting marginalized communities across America. Initial contact was tense. Neighbors were protective. Outsiders were not always welcomed. Eventually, Leiter gained access and photographed the family for his book Created Equal, published in 2009. The world noticed, but it wasn't until 2020 that the Whittakers became globally known. That year, a documentary-style interview was uploaded to the YouTube channel Soft White Underbelly. The video went viral. Millions of viewers watched. The Whittaker name spread across social media. And Timmy's face, once shielded by anonymity, became instantly recognizable. With viral attention came donations. A public fundraiser was established to improve living conditions. Tens of thousands of dollars were raised. Renovations were completed. A roof was repaired. Heating improved. Vehicles were purchased. For the first time in decades, the Whittaker property saw structural upgrades. But internet fame is a double-edged sword. Attention brought scrutiny. Scrutiny brought speculation. Speculation brought conflict. Questions resurfaced. Who was Timmy's father? Was his conception the result of assault? Was it incest? Was someone in the family responsible? Why was no one charged? The answers remained absent. And then, in September 2025, the situation changed dramatically. West Virginia Adult Protective Services removed 3 family members from the property: Ray Whittaker, Lauren Whittaker, and Timmy Whittaker. They were placed into state care. Betty and Larry remained at the home. No detailed public explanation was released due to privacy protections surrounding adult protective cases. We do not know the specific legal findings. We do not know the internal assessment criteria. We do not know the full safety evaluation. We know only that the state intervened. And as of early 2026, Timmy remains in care. Some argue the removal was necessary due to health and safety conditions. Others argue it was an overreach. Some blame online exposure. Some blame living conditions. Some blame exploitation concerns. Some blame systemic neglect. What we do not have is a publicly released case file. Which brings us back to the question people continue to ask. Who is Timmy Whittaker's father? Here is the responsible answer. We do not know. There is no verified public document identifying him. There is no confirmed criminal conviction attached to his name. There is no DNA test released. There is no official paternity ruling publicly accessible. Anything beyond that is theory. And when dealing with a living, vulnerable adult who cannot advocate for himself, theory can become harm. What remains undeniable is this. Timmy Whittaker was born into poverty. He was raised in isolation. He graduated high school despite significant obstacles. He became unintentionally famous. He survived a heart attack in his early 40s. He lost the only home he had known when the state intervened. He now lives somewhere under supervised care. That is the documented arc. The father question may never be answered publicly. And perhaps the more pressing question now is not who fathered him, but what responsibility society holds toward him today. Because while the internet debates origins, Timmy is living the consequences of every decision made around him. This is only the beginning of the documented record. In Part 2, we examine the public claims surrounding assault, what has and has not been verified, and how silence became part of the Whittaker family story. If you're following this investigation, comment one word, fact or speculation, and tell me which one you think has dominated this story for too long. Because when people ask who Timmy Whittaker's father is, they are rarely just asking about paternity. They are asking whether a crime occurred. They are asking whether the assault of a vulnerable woman was ignored. They are asking whether silence protected someone. So let's separate what has been publicly claimed from what has been proven. Over the years, in various interviews and online discussions, it has been stated that Lauren Whittaker was sexually assaulted before Timmy was born. That claim appears in multiple retellings of the family's history. It has been referenced in commentary videos and discussions surrounding the Whittakers. But here is the key distinction. There is no publicly released police report. There is no publicly available court record. There is no documented arrest. There is no confirmed conviction. If an investigation occurred in the late 1970s, its records have not been made public. And that matters. In rural Appalachia during that era, investigations into crimes against disabled women were often under-resourced. Law enforcement capacity was limited. Social services infrastructure was minimal. Mandatory reporting standards were weaker than they are today. It is entirely possible that an assault occurred and was never successfully prosecuted. It is also possible that no formal case was ever opened. Both realities can exist in communities with limited institutional oversight, but possibility is not proof. When people assert, confidently, that Timmy was born from rape, they are often relying on repeated statements within online narratives rather than on verifiable documents. That does not automatically mean those statements are false, but it does mean they remain unconfirmed. Now consider the second layer of speculation. Some online commentators have suggested that because the Whittaker family has a documented history of consanguineous relationships in prior generations, Timmy's father must have been a relative. Again, no public evidence confirms that. Genetic similarity is not legal evidence. Physical resemblance is not forensic proof. Cognitive disability does not establish incest. The Whittaker family tree has been widely discussed. It is documented that in earlier generations, close relatives married and had children together. That historical fact has shaped public perception of every subsequent birth in the family. But that history does not automatically determine Timmy's paternity. It creates suspicion. It creates narrative tension. It fuels assumptions. It does not create confirmation. We also have to consider something uncomfortable. The internet often prefers scandal over ambiguity. Unknown father does not generate clicks. Incest baby does. That incentive structure distorts public conversation. There is another dimension rarely discussed: consent. Lauren Whittaker has been described consistently as nonverbal and significantly cognitively impaired. If that description is accurate, then any sexual encounter involving her would raise serious consent questions. But again, no court record has publicly confirmed a criminal determination. If an assault occurred, it was a crime against a vulnerable woman. If an assault occurred and went unprosecuted, it reflects systemic failure. If no assault occurred and the father was simply unknown or uninvolved, that is a different reality entirely. The problem is that we do not have documented clarity. What we do have is the lived reality that followed. Timmy was raised without a father figure publicly identified. There is no record of child support proceedings, no documented custody disputes, no known paternal visitation, no publicly identified paternal family involvement. From childhood through adulthood, Timmy's life appears to have centered entirely around the Whittaker household. Now consider the practical implications of that. In many rural communities in the late 1970s and 1980s, birth certificates sometimes listed father unknown if paternity was not legally established. DNA testing was not routine. Social services tracking was minimal. If the mother could not articulate an accusation, and no one pressed charges, cases often stalled. That historical context matters when evaluating the silence. Silence does not automatically equal conspiracy. Sometimes silence equals neglect. Sometimes it equals shame. Sometimes it equals lack of institutional follow-through. Sometimes it equals a family deciding to handle matters privately. Sometimes it equals fear. We cannot project motive without evidence. There is also an ethical dimension here. Lauren, Timmy's mother, has never been able to publicly tell her story in her own words. She is nonverbal. She has been filmed over the years, but never interviewed in a way that allowed her to narrate events surrounding Timmy's conception. That means every version of the story has come from secondary sources. Betty Whittaker has never publicly named a perpetrator. Larry Whittaker has never publicly named a perpetrator. No sibling has publicly identified someone. No neighbor has come forward with documented proof. No official statement has been released naming a suspect. In criminal justice terms, that leaves us with an unresolved allegation, not a proven case. Now consider the broader consequences of misidentification. If the father were a living individual in that community and internet speculation named him without evidence, that could constitute defamation. If the father were deceased, unverified claims would still harm living relatives. If the father were unrelated to the Whittakers entirely, speculation about incest would be falsely attaching stigma. So the responsible position is restraint. That does not mean ignoring the possibility of assault. It means refusing to invent details. There is another layer rarely acknowledged: Timmy himself. As of 2026, Timmy Whittaker is in state care. He is an adult with significant developmental limitations. He cannot publicly clarify the story. He cannot demand a DNA test on camera. He cannot issue a statement correcting rumors. He exists in a world where strangers debate his conception. That reality alone should slow the tone of public discussion. There are also structural reasons why the father question may never be answered publicly. If a criminal case was never opened, there may be no surviving investigative file. If a criminal case was opened but sealed due to victim privacy protections, records may remain confidential indefinitely. If guardianship proceedings exist for Timmy or Lauren, those records are typically sealed. If DNA testing has never been conducted, the question remains biologically open. And even if DNA testing were conducted privately, results are not automatically public record. So when people ask, why won't they just tell us? They may be assuming information exists that is either sealed, lost, or never formally created. This leads to an uncomfortable but necessary conclusion. It is possible that no one alive today has definitive, documented proof of Timmy's father. That does not make the question illegitimate. It makes it historically unresolved. There is also a psychological element. For viewers encountering the Whittaker story for the first time, the unknown father becomes a narrative anchor. It feels like the missing piece that explains everything. But lives are rarely that simple. Timmy's developmental profile cannot be reduced to one genetic variable. His health outcomes, including a reported heart attack in his early 40s, cannot be pinned solely on paternity. Environmental stress, poverty, diet, limited healthcare access, chronic stress, and genetic predisposition all intersect. Reducing his entire identity to who fathered him strips away decades of lived experience. Which brings us to a broader ethical question. What does the public gain by knowing? If the father were identified tomorrow, would that change Timmy's current reality? Would it return him home? Would it improve his medical care? Would it repair decades of isolation? Or would it simply satisfy curiosity? Curiosity is human, but when curiosity intersects with vulnerability, restraint becomes moral. This does not mean abandoning the possibility that injustice occurred. If Lauren was assaulted and no one was held accountable, that represents systemic failure. If evidence exists and remains hidden, that deserves scrutiny. But scrutiny must be grounded in documentation. At this stage, what we have is an unresolved origin story laid over a documented life. Timmy Whittaker, born 1979, raised in Odd, West Virginia, graduated high school, lived with family for over 4 decades, survived significant health events, became globally known through viral media, removed to state care in 2025, currently under supervision in an undisclosed facility. That is the verifiable arc. The father question remains open, and until evidence emerges, DNA, court documents, law enforcement records, the honest answer remains. We do not know. In Part 3, we will examine how internet fame reshaped the Whittaker family narrative, including how speculation about Timmy's father intensified after viral exposure, and how public attention may have influenced the events that led to state intervention. Before moving forward, answer this in the comments with one word: justice, if you believe the focus should remain on investigating the alleged crime. Or privacy, if you believe protecting Timmy's present matters more than solving his past. When the internet found the Whittakers, the story changed. Not their daily routine, not their porch, not their poverty. The story. Before viral exposure, the Whittakers were a local reality in Odd. Known, whispered about, sometimes protected, sometimes mocked, but contained within geography. After 2020, they were global. And that shift matters when we talk about Timmy and about his father. Because once millions of strangers began watching, the unanswered question of paternity stopped being private ambiguity and became public obsession. It started with exposure through soft white underbelly, created by Mark Leiter. The videos were raw, minimal editing, long interviews, no dramatic music. Just people speaking about their lives. For many viewers, it felt compassionate. For others, it felt exploitative. But regardless of perspective, the outcome was measurable. Tens of millions of views. And once a video crosses that threshold, the audience changes. Early viewers may be curious. Later viewers arrive because it is viral. After that, commentary channels arrive, then reaction channels, then speculation channels, then the narrative fractures. Timmy, who had lived his entire life in relative obscurity, became a face on thumbnails. Lauren became a symbol. Betty became a spokesperson. Larry became quotable. Ray became memified. And Timmy became a question mark. Who is his father? The question intensified not because new evidence appeared, but because visibility increased. That is an important distinction. Virality does not create new facts. It creates amplification of old uncertainty. When people saw Timmy on screen, nonverbal, visibly developmentally impaired, sitting quietly on the porch, they tried to reverse engineer his life from appearance alone. They made inferences. They connected dots that may or may not connect. They pulled at the thread of family history, the documented consanguineous marriages in prior generations, and applied it forward to him. The problem is this: genetic resemblance is not genealogical proof. Yet once an audience begins repeating a theory, repetition begins to resemble certainty. That is how online narratives harden. And the father question became one of the hardest. But something else happened during those viral years. Money entered the equation. Crowdfunding campaigns were created. Donations were sent. Vehicles were purchased. Home repairs were made. Medical expenses were paid. According to public fundraising pages, significant amounts of money were raised for the Whittaker family. With money comes scrutiny. With scrutiny comes suspicion. And suspicion often looks for a villain. The unknown father became a narrative villain. Unidentified, uncharged, unproven, but necessary for dramatic storytelling. Then came another layer: internal conflict. Other content creators began visiting the property. Filming increased. Allegations surfaced. Counter-allegations followed. The family, who had once been filmed occasionally, now found cameras appearing more frequently. Strangers showed up. Drones flew overhead. People knocked. People called. Timmy remained largely silent in all of it. But he was present, which raises a difficult question. Did the speculation about his father increase because people cared about justice, or because the mystery was marketable? It is possible for both motivations to exist simultaneously. There is another timeline that intersects here. Between 2020 and 2024, reports surfaced of health crises within the family. Heart attacks, emergency medical needs, fire damage to part of the property. Each event generated new waves of attention. Each wave reopened old questions. And each time the father question resurfaced, not because new evidence emerged, but because drama renews curiosity. Then in September 2025, a major shift occurred. West Virginia Adult Protective Services intervened. Timmy, Ray, and Lauren were removed from the property and placed into state care. Betty and Larry remained. Official explanations were limited due to confidentiality laws surrounding vulnerable adults, which created a vacuum. And vacuums get filled. Some viewers blamed living conditions. Some blamed exploitation by content creators. Some blamed government overreach. Some blamed family members. Some blamed viral exposure itself. And some returned again to the father question, as if identifying the man from 1979 would somehow clarify the removal in 2025. But causation does not travel backward like that. Timmy was removed in his mid-40s, not because of his paternity, but because of present-day risk assessments made by state authorities. That distinction matters. The system does not remove adults from homes to solve unresolved origin stories. It removes based on current safety conditions: housing, sanitation, medical stability, exploitation concerns, ability to provide consistent care. So the father question, while emotionally powerful, is not legally central to Timmy's current placement. That is another uncomfortable truth. Now consider how the internet responded to the removal. Petitions were started. Change.org campaigns circulated. Comment sections filled with outrage. People who had never visited West Virginia debated what was best for Timmy. Some argued he belonged home. Others argued he needed structured care. But few had access to case files. Few had medical reports. Few had home inspection documentation. And none had authority over the decision. This is where the story shifts from origin to oversight. When vulnerable adults become viral subjects, two forces collide. Public empathy. Institutional responsibility. Public empathy wants reunification. Institutional responsibility prioritizes documented risk mitigation. Those frameworks do not always align. And in that tension, speculation intensifies, including about his father. Because when people feel powerless about present events, they return to unresolved pasts. Maybe if we knew who his father was, maybe that would explain everything. But explanation is not intervention. Even if a DNA test were conducted tomorrow and a name were released, it would not automatically reverse the 2025 state decision. Which forces us to confront a harder reality. The father question may matter historically. It may matter morally. But it may not matter administratively. Timmy's daily life in state care depends on current evaluations, not 1979. And yet, ignoring the father entirely feels incomplete. So where does that leave us? With layered truths. It is possible that Lauren was assaulted and justice never occurred. It is possible that records exist but remain confidential. It is possible that no formal investigation was pursued. It is possible that Timmy's father was never legally identified. It is possible that the public will never receive a definitive answer. All 5 statements can be simultaneously true, and none of them authorize invention. There is also a psychological cost to consider. For decades, Timmy's life unfolded without national scrutiny. After viral exposure, he became a subject of genetic debate. That shift has consequences. Human beings are not puzzles to be solved for entertainment. When we ask who his father is, we must ask why we need to know. Is it to pursue justice? Is it to satisfy curiosity? Is it to reinforce a narrative? Is it to protect future vulnerable women? Is it to contextualize genetic history? Each motivation leads to a different ethical pathway. Justice requires evidence. Curiosity requires restraint. Narrative requires conflict. Protection requires systemic reform. Context requires careful language. Only one of those protects Timmy directly. Protection. And that brings us forward. In 2026, Timmy Whittaker lives somewhere under supervised care. He is no longer on the porch. He is no longer in viral thumbnails. He is not publicly accessible. His father is still unidentified, but his present condition, safety, medical oversight, structured environment, now carries more immediate weight than his conception story. That does not erase the past. It reframes priority. Because if justice was denied in 1979, it cannot be retroactively manufactured through comment sections. It requires documentation. It requires law enforcement. It requires prosecutorial standards. And without those, we remain in the realm of narrative, not proof. Which leads to part 4. In the next section, we will examine what state care actually means in West Virginia, what protections exist, what oversight structures apply, and how vulnerable adults are typically supervised once removed from family homes. Because understanding Timmy's present may be more actionable than solving his origin. Before we move forward, answer this with one word: past, if you believe solving the father question is the priority, or present, If you believe Timmy's current well-being matters more right now, when people hear state care, they imagine something cold. A locked door, a white hallway, a loss. But in West Virginia, adult protective intervention typically follows a structured framework. When a vulnerable adult is removed from a private residence, the state must justify it under specific criteria: inability to meet basic needs, documented environmental hazards, medical instability, or credible risk of exploitation. It is not designed as punishment. It is designed as risk management. That distinction matters. If Timmy was placed in a licensed care setting in 2025, several conditions would typically apply: regular medical oversight, medication management, supervised hygiene support, documented nutrition plans, restricted outside access, mandatory reporting requirements for staff. Facilities are inspected. Caregivers are accountable to agencies. Records are kept. That does not guarantee perfection. No system guarantees perfection. But it does mean oversight exists in a structured way that private households do not always have. And here is the difficult truth. For someone like Timmy, nonverbal, developmentally impaired, medically vulnerable, structured oversight can reduce certain risks dramatically. No unauthorized filming. No informal fundraising access. No unverified caretaking arrangements. No strangers showing up unannounced. Privacy increases. Monitoring increases. Exposure decreases. Those changes alone can alter long-term safety outcomes. Now we return to the father question. If Lauren was assaulted in the late 1970s, the failure occurred decades ago. The system failed then. Our documentation never advanced. That is historical injustice. But the state intervention in 2025 is not a retroactive response to that assault. It is a present-day response to conditions observed at that time. The two timelines intersect emotionally, but not administratively. And that is why separating them is necessary. Timmy's father remains unidentified. That may never change. Records from rural Appalachia in the 1970s were not always preserved. Investigations into crimes against disabled women were not always prioritized. Community silence can become permanent, so the responsible statement in 2026 remains this: there is no verified public record naming Timmy Whittaker's biological father. There is documented family history of genetic intermarriage in earlier generations. There are allegations of assault. There is no confirmed legal conclusion available to the public. And until that changes, speculation is not evidence. Timmy's life cannot be reduced to a question mark. He is a high school graduate, a man who survived heart attacks, a person who lived 46 years in one place before being relocated, a human being with dignity, even without a public voice. The internet may never get a satisfying answer about his father, but the more urgent question in 2026 is this: is he safe? Because origin explains the past. Safety determines the future. If you followed this entire story, comment one word: justice. If you believe the father's identity must still be pursued. Or protection, if you believe Timmy's present well-being is the priority now. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.